So welcome to another video of OpenStax Astronomy. We'll be looking at Chapter 4, Earth, Moon, and Sky, and this is going to be part 2. Okay, so we'll continue in 4.5 talking about phases of the moon. And so as the moon orbits around the Earth, the Earth is also orbiting around the sun. And so the moon, like planets, does not emit any of its own light. It only reflects the light from the sun. So depending where it's at in its orbit, it's going to reflect light at different angles, or different portions of it will be illuminated. So again, why do we see those phases? Again, it has to do as a consequence as the moon's orbit around the Earth. The orbital period is about 27 1/3 days, so what we call a sidereal month, as we go all the way around. And so, for example here, this image on the bottom, we can see that if the sunlight is coming in and if the sunlight is coming in on from this direction here, then we'll see that this side of the Earth is illuminated, as so is that side of the moon. So the right side's there. So we're both just reflecting that light. Now from Earth, the vantage point now, if we're on this end here and we're looking at the moon, we're going to see some darkness there, right? We're not going to get all of that light, so we'll just be able to see a portion of it. So depending on where we are, we're going to start seeing those different phases, so different parts being illuminated. So half of the moon is illuminated by the sun, and then half is dark. And during our orbit, we're going to see those different portions. So depending on our position here, if the sun is over here, let's say, then we will see a full moon only when our alignment. So the full moon would appear when the sun is directly in front, right? So that whole portion of the moon will be illuminated. If we're looking here at a new moon, well, the back side, or the back towards us, is illuminated. So we're going to just see darkness, and that's what we consider that new moon. So as we go around, we'll have the different phases here. Crescents, when less than half of it is illuminated. Gibbous, when more than half. And on this next slide, we'll actually talk about these phases a bit more here. So the phases are, the cycle is 29.5 days for the actual cycle to go through. Again, since we're both moving, the sidereal phase is going to be slightly different. So whenever this right side is illuminated, we call that a waxing. And whenever the left side is illuminated, we call that a waning phase. So for example, this phase here would be called a waxing crescent. And over here, this would be called a waning gibbous. And it always goes from right to left side that gets illuminated because of our orbit. And so that first quarter is when the right side is illuminated. The last quarter or third quarter would be when the left side is illuminated. And so you can see it's increasing more up until that full moon. So new moon, waxing crescent, first quarter, waxing gibbous, full moon, waning gibbous, third quarter or last quarter, and then a waning crescent. So is there a dark side of the moon, as this band once suggested here? And the answer is actually no. There is not a dark side of the moon, but there is an other side of the moon, or the back side. So we are in synchronous rotation with the moon, meaning that we're kind of in a dance where we're always facing each other. So as we orbit around, we are locked in and we always see the same side of the moon. But that means the sun, though, pretend the sun is over here on this right side, Well, it's possible then that the sun could illuminate the back side, and then here it's illuminating the front side. So the entire moon does get illuminated. There is no dark side there, but there is the back side because we are locked in that synchronous rotation. And so why does the moon always show us the same face? And so we're kind of tied in there. Our gravitational pulls are kind of tugging on each other as we're orbiting around. So we're always synced up there. And as the Earth spins around, it also tends to tug on there. And the moon pulls back there, so we kind of get that friction causes us to actually lock there. And then this creates some of those tidal frictions as well. So as the gravity pushes on, as the gravity tugs on the Earth, it's kind of like a squishy ball where it ever so slightly doesn't leave it exactly spherical, but it kind of changes its shape, elongates it very slightly. And so that causes the water is more easily lifted, right? That changing in there creates those tides there. And so we call those tidal bulges. And so since the Earth rotates, it kind of locks in there and they slightly tug on each other there. So we'll discuss a little bit more about ocean tides and the moon. And again, it has to do with that gravitational attraction that it has. So formation of tides, again, the moon, if it's tugging on us, it's going to elongate it very slightly. And it's going to create that bulge because it's pulling harder on one side than the other. And so that causes the Earth to stretch, creating that tidal force. Here we have an image, side-by-side comparison of a low and high tide, right? And you could see the vast differences there of how much water is covered and then how much it actually recesses down. So let's connect the phases of the moon here, and so how that connects with the tides as well. So when we get these spring tides, the moon and the sun are at opposite sides, both of them tugging on it, and it elongates the Earth even longer, creating those higher tides. When the moon and sun are perpendicular to one another, it kind of evens it out. The sun tugging on it, even though it's larger, it's further away. The moon, smaller but closer, tugs on it as well, and so it doesn't stretch it out as much. You still get a slight bulge, but it ends up being a bit more even. This leads us to eclipses here of the sun and the moon. And so everything casts a shadow. If you block light or sunlight, a tree will create a shadow, your body. Every object does, including the Earth and the moon. So eclipses are just when we're in the proper path of one of those shadows. So a lunar eclipse, notice the position that the Earth is going to be in between. And then for a solar eclipse, the moon is in between. And so we're seeing that shadow of the moon onto the Earth. So the areas of an eclipse, there are some darker regions, which we call the umbra, and then the lighter regions, which is the penumbra. So we don't always get a total eclipse. It depends where exactly you're at. Alignment. So for the lunar eclipse, it has to be a full moon. So the sun has to be on one end, casting light on the Earth, and then the Earth creating a shadow that goes onto the moon. So for a lunar eclipse, it will only occur at a full moon. Here's another image, the sun, Earth, and then the moon, and you could see that the shadow of the Earth is being casted. Types of a lunar eclipse, whether it's a total lunar eclipse, partial lunar eclipse and then a penumbra lunar eclipse. And the total lunar eclipse are slightly strange because they're not completely dark. It tends to get darker and darker and cover up. But once it actually completely covers up, you actually have some of the sun rays that actually go around, that get tugged on there. So gravity slightly bends those around, but you'll kind of get those lights that go around there, and it'll create this haze, kind of giving this reddish blood moon. And so here's an image of a total eclipse. So it gets darker, and actually when you expect it to get completely darkened out, it creates that reddish color. Phases of the moon, 29.5 day cycle. Okay, so think of month, moon, that's where that came from. So why doesn't a lunar eclipse occur each month at every full moon, right? So that's the alignment that we need, but why don't we get an eclipse every single month? And so the reason is that the moon's orbit is slightly tilted off the ecliptic plane, just about 5 degrees, but it's just enough where it will actually miss the shadows. So here, the moon being right below, over here as well, right? You can see that it's above. So those shadows don't actually line up if they're off those planes. Only times they line up are going to be here on these nodes, right on the edges there where the both orbits are on the same plane. So we have about 2 eclipses seasons each year. So just another image of the nodes there. Again, where these planes intersect. And so solar eclipse, again, is just going to be positioning. So now we have the sun, the moon, and the earth in alignment. And since the moon is a lot smaller than the sun, that shadow that gets casted doesn't cover the entire earth. And so we typically only see those solar eclipses on portions of the earth here. So here's a better image where you can see that shadow being casted, but it only covers a slight area there. So that'll be in a total eclipse. In the umbra, and then in the penumbra, we would be having just a partial eclipse. So solar eclipse only occur at new moons, again, because of the alignment. So since the moon is between us, we would the light will be on the backside. So it would only occur on a new moon. And there's a total eclipse. Warning, do not ever look at the sun during a solar eclipse, even though that light is blocked off. Your eyes do not have pain receptors, and you can go blind. Galileo went blind looking at the moon. So please make sure you never ever look at the sun without, you need special corrective lenses to block out those rays. And there's our kind of our warning, right? So never ever look at the sun. But these solar eclipses are very helpful to us because when we do look at the sun, there is a lot of light. And it's only during that solar eclipse where a lot of that light is blocked off and we could start seeing the haze around, which is one of the layers of the sun, the corona. And we learn a lot of information by looking at these outer layers of the sun. So every time we have an eclipse, it's a good opportunity for us to get more information about it. And here's an image from space. You could actually see that shadow being casted on a portion of the Earth there, the umbra. And since these cycles happen over and over, we talked about there's an 18-year cycle or 18.6-year cycle that has been kept track of the moon. There's also an 11 and a third day Ceres cycle. So there's a lot of different cycles of the moon. And so we're actually able to keep track of when we would actually see these eclipses occurring. So these are the different cycles, and when these align at certain times, it'll give us a better accurate picture of this. So that's one of the nice things, that as we look at orbits and we could keep track of them, over time we'll be able to identify those patterns, and we could actually plot out with quite accuracy when these partial and total eclipses will occur.